Okay, today I'm in Gloucestershire with David Ashforth, journalist and prolific author. Thanks very much for taking some time, mate, to speak to us today. You've just said Ashforth's Curiosities of Horse Racing published. How many books is that?
That's the 10th one about racing. Although in a previous life, I contributed to books on the 19th century poor law, and I wrote a book called Records of Achievement in the Marketplace when I was doing educational research.
Okay, so you came from an academic background before you got into the world of horse racing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I didn't start full time in racing journalism until I was 41, I think. And before that, I had an academic career. I did a doctoral thesis on the treatment of poverty in 19th century Bradford, and then I lectured in history and economics, but I was always very keen on racing. From at school, a friend and I used to go to betting shop in Borehamwood High Street regularly, and we had a system. Actually, we had a system based on Leicester Piggott. We'd decide how much we wanted to win, and I think it was about £2, and then we'd put enough on to win the £2, whatever the odds were, and if it won, we'd start again. If it lost, we'd go on to Piggott's next mount. Well, it's fairly obvious that it's a flawed system, and we soon realised after about 7 successive losers that we wouldn't have enough money to put on the next one. So that system didn't work very well.
I bet it worked to begin with, though, didn't it?
It worked. It worked.
They always do, don't they?
It worked for a bit. And we went to first time at a racecourse. We went to Sandown on a Len's scooter, and that's what got me hooked on it. Really, it's the excitement of it. Leicester rode a winner called Italiano. I don't know why I remember that, but just the excitement, standing by the rail and the sound of the horse and the whip and the jockey and the bookmakers and the 3-card tricksters. Mercifully, you don't see those anymore. Prince Monolulu and other tipsters, you don't see them anymore either.
You don't. I do remember the 3-card tricksters, just about from the beginning of my in inverted commas career. But anyway, so there's some wonderful characters in the book, and from some quite obscure sources. I spent a lot of my time googling when I was fascinated and wanted to find out a little bit more. So, are you extremely well read, or do you just delve deeper?
I like research. I'm sort of used to research, and I enjoy research. I mean, some people would find it bizarre. I mean, my idea of a nice time is sit in the National Archives all day, poring over documents. I just enjoy that, and so I put a lot of research into this book. I mean, probably 2 years, and it's exciting when you unearth something that's interesting, and it's a nice feeling, and I enjoy it.
Is it getting a bit easier now to do the research with the newspaper archives online and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, they're really the archives that you can get to online, particularly the newspaper archives, are amazing, really. So I use those a lot, which is just as well. Energy levels aren't what they were, so travelling around to different archives would be probably less easy.
Yeah. So what is everything? Did you sort of dig up everybody yourself, or does anybody mark your card?
Occasionally I get a sort of lead from someone, but mainly they're things I've unearthed myself.
Okay, so who's your favourite character in the latest book?
Yeah, I think it's a guy called the 17th Lord Say and Sale. He's certainly not a favourite because of any sort of merit he had. He was a dreadful character, really. But although, and it was partly because of how I discovered the story. I went and visited Broughton Castle just for somewhere to visit, really. And when I was going round, there was this cabinet which had a painting of a horse called Placida. I didn't know who she was, but she won the 1877 Oaks, and she was owned by the 17th Lord Say and Sale. And I spoke to the son of the present Lord Say and Sale, who's the 21st one, who's 102, still alive. And he took me up some stairs to an attic, and there was an enormous picture of Placida there. And anyway, he said that if I wanted to, I could look at the family archives. And so that's where I got the story from. And I mean, it wasn't uncommon for the sons of aristocrats to gamble away the family fortune. But I don't think anyone could have done it on quite such a sort of determined and fatal way as the 17th Lord Say-and-Sale. He managed to bankrupt not only himself but his poor father, who was Archdeacon of Hereford Cathedral for a while, probably in order to pray a lot, I should think. So by the time his father died, his father was no longer able to live in Broughton Castle. He had to let it, and the 17th Earl, who the present one called a bad man, never lived in it. He always let it out. And when his father finally died, and he'd been borrowing money left, right, and centre, all the rents from the massive estates weren't sufficient to cover the interest on all the loans he'd been taking out. So it all ended in absolute disaster.
He was one of the ones I googled.
Right.
Brilliant. So we talked your writing career, the racing, if I got this right, was in 1988 with The Sporting Life. You say you're 41, but for the racing game, it's a relative late starter. So when did the enthusiasm after going racing turn into an ambition to actually earn money from?
Well, I mean, I was really into racing. I mean, I used to say I only know much about two things: the 19th century poor law and racing. Those Timeform racehorse annuals, I'd get those and I'd literally read it from beginning to end, which seems a fairly strange thing to do now. But anyway, I thought that along the way I'd built up a sort of collection of characters who interested me, and I thought they'd be interesting to meet and write about, because I only never met any of these. They were all seen from a distance, and same with horses. And it was when I was working at the National Foundation for Educational Research, I just sort of on spec wrote a piece which was prompted by Ilda Sheeper's bizarre unseating Greville Starkey at Ascot in 1988. And I just sent a piece in about the equine eccentrics, which they published. And then I wrote something else, and then they asked me to write other things, and eventually they asked if I'd like to work for them full time.
And eccentrics, we'll go on to that in a bit, but eccentrics seem to be a particular interest of yours, but mainly human ones.
Yes. That I remember that first article for two things really. One was that they'd put my byline as David Ashworth, which is fairly commonplace. And the other thing was I was so excited when it came out, and I took it into the education place, and I showed it to someone, and she took it away to read. And after a while, she hadn't given it me back, and I asked if she'd read it, or got it ready to give me back. And she said, yes, I'm not sure where I put it. And then the next day she turned up triumphantly with this rather tatty article and said, it was in the bottom of the rabbit hutch. So I thought.
So your first article, that one was published in 1988.
Yeah.
And then you started full time in 1990.
Yeah.
So did you sort of carry on writing part time?
Between 1990.
And you were doing the academic.
Yeah, at the same time. Yeah, I was working at the same time. Yeah.
Okay, and you mentioned the early days in your career. Now, I did read a couple of funny stories, though I doubt they were funny at the time. You rang a trainer and asked about a horse that had sadly broken its neck a few days before.
Yeah. That was Gordon Richards. I had to ring Gordon Richards and ask him about a horse called Full Strength, and I said, asked him how Full Strength was, and he said, "Not really well, lad. Broke his neck 3 days ago." So I wasn't very successful. And another one was I had to ring one of the War family. I can't remember. Jack, I think it was. No, it wasn't Jack. It was Tom. I had to ring to give him the bad news that I think I've got the names the wrong way around. It might have been Tom who died. Anyway, one of the Wars had died, so I rang up whichever one of the other ones was, and I said, I'm sorry to hear that Tom Wall, let's say, has died. And he said, died? He was only here a couple of days ago. God, died. You better ring so-and-so. It's another one of the Wall family. So I rang him, and he said, died? Oh, you better ring Jack Wall, you better ring. So I rang Jack Wall. Sorry to hear that Tom Wall's died. And he burst out laughing. He said, "That's bloody amazing," and he walked out of the door 10 minutes ago. So,
And one that probably wasn't quite so funny at the time. You went to interview a couple of jockeys.
yes, I thought it'd be a nice idea to interview a couple of apprentice jockeys who were having some success. So I went to Newmarket and met. One of them was called Stephen Quain, who I think was with Luca Cumani, and the other was Darren Biggs. So I carried out the interview, and when I played the tape back, there was nothing on it. It was one of those moments that life gives you to make you feel humiliated.
And were you going racing much? Were you sort of being sent off
Yes,
to the races?
I was being sent off racing regularly.
So
Yeah.
did you sit in anybody's seat? Did you get any
Oh,
terrifying
in the press room.
lambastings?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think most people were pretty nice to me. In the office, in the Sporting Life, I was very lucky because on the news desk there was Nick Reeves and Gary Nutting, Mike Catamol, and they were all really nice. Good. It was a fun place to work.
There's a lot of the older members of the press room I've spoken to have nearly always got a horror story about their first day. They sat in a seat that somebody sat in for 40 years.
Oh yes, yeah, there was a bit of that, and probably one or two people either wondered who I was or would rather I wasn't there. I don't know.
Okay, and I read, I sort of Google stuff, so correct me if I'm wrong, but Alistair Down and Ian Carnaby were sort of early influences on your career.
Well, Ian was a friend at university, and he's been a friend ever since. And then we ended up both writing for the Sporting Life, and I still see Ian regularly and go racing with Ian, and so he's a lifelong friend really. And Alistair was responsible really for me getting the job at the Sporting Life, because at that time he was features editor, and so it was he that I liaised with really about features. He used to write a weekly column in the Weekender in those days, and it was bloody funny. It was very good.
It was on the same page as Jeffrey Bernard, I think, wasn't it?
Oh, it might have been, yeah. Jeffrey Bernard. I interviewed Jeffrey Bernard once. He took about 3 vodkas before he sort of made contact with the world. I can remember there were the publican had letters waiting for him, and he opened these envelopes while I was there, and there's a picture of a very attractive woman, making it clear that she was available if he'd like to meet her, and he sort of just pushed her aside dismissively. I thought, well, if he doesn't want her, maybe he'd like to pass on to me. But yeah, so but Alistair used to he'd sort of bustle into the office, usually quite late, but looking as if he'd just been to a very important meeting. But he was, he was a character.
And you said those columns were quite witty.
Very.
I remember. I'm pretty sure they're both on the same page in
Yeah.
the Weekend. Now you've got a very dry sense of humour in your writing. Is that your writing style, or is that you in life?
I mean, it comes naturally to me. I suppose we have different kinds of humour, and that just happens to be my kind. I haven't really thought about it a lot, but that's just how it comes out.